I was 7 centimeters dilated when I looked to my side and saw my husband, with headphones on, controller in hand, concentrated, killing virtual monsters while his wife groaned in pain live, bringing his son into the real world. The contractions were coming faster now, each one feeling like my body was being torn apart from the inside. The sterile hospital room smelled of disinfectant and fear, and the only sounds were the steady beeping of monitors, my labored breathing, and the infuriating click, click, click of Pedro's controller buttons. "Pedro?" My voice came out shaky, between contractions. I reached for his hand, desperate for some human connection, some acknowledgement that I wasn't going through this alone. "Relax, honey. I'm here, just unwinding. This distracts me, you know." He said this without even looking at me, his eyes glued to the screen where some muscular character was slashing through enemies. "Can you keep it down a bit? I'm in the middle of a boss fight. Keep it down," while giving birth to his child. The doctor, Dr. David Martinez, a calm and experienced man in his early 40s with kind brown eyes and graying temples, paused in his examination. He had been checking my progress, his movements gentle and professional, but I saw something shift in his expression as he witnessed Pedro's complete disconnection from this moment. "Dr. Martinez looked at me with tired eyes of someone who had seen too much, too many absent fathers, too many women going through the most vulnerable moment of their lives without real support. His voice was quiet, but firm when he said, "You don't need him." Those 5 words entered my soul like anesthesia, numbing the emotional pain even as my body screamed with physical agony. For the first time, someone saw what I pretended not to see. I had been alone in that marriage for a long time. The video game was just another detail in a pattern of neglect that had been building for years. I thought about our dating days, when Pedro would cancel plans because he was in the middle of something important online. I thought about our wedding day, when he spent the reception on his phone checking game updates instead of dancing with me. I thought about the pregnancy, when he missed every single doctor's appointment because they conflicted with his gaming schedule. The birth was difficult and lasted 14 hours. Pedro played through most of it, pausing only when the nurses asked him to move so they could access equipment. When Arthur finally arrived at 3:47 a.m., strong and beautiful, with a full head of dark hair and lungs that announced his arrival to the world, Pedro was in the middle of what he called an important raid. "Pedro, your son is here, Doctor," Martinez said firmly, cutting the umbilical cord himself when it became clear that Pedro wasn't going to put down the controller. Pedro glanced over briefly, said, "Cool, he's cute," and went back to his screen. "I'll hold him in a minute. Just need to finish this level." He never did hold him that first night. Arthur spent his first hours in this world sleeping on my chest, while his father achieved whatever digital milestone was so important. Dr. Martinez stayed longer than necessary, checking on me multiple times, bringing me water, adjusting my pillows. His kindness felt foreign after living with Pedro's indifference for so long. "Congratulations, Mrs. Santos," he said softly as he prepared to leave. "You did beautifully. Arthur is lucky to have such a strong mother." I wanted to cry, but I was too exhausted. "Thank you, doctor, for everything." He hesitated at the door, then turned back. "What I said earlier, I meant it. You're stronger than you know." I went home with a baby in my arms and an emptiness in my chest that felt bigger than the Grand Canyon. Pedro remained the same, absent, cold, distant, but with all achievements unlocked. In the game. In real life, zero evolution. The first weeks were a blur of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and the constant cry of a newborn who seemed to sense the tension in his home. Pedro would emerge from his gaming room occasionally, usually to complain about the noise or to ask when dinner would be ready. "Can't you keep him quiet?" he'd say, annoyed, as if Arthur was just another inconvenience in his perfectly ordered digital world. I was surviving on 2 hours of sleep, my body still recovering from childbirth, trying to figure out how to be a mother while feeling utterly alone. Pedro's idea of helping was buying a baby monitor so he could hear if Arthur was crying from his gaming room. Not to help, but to know when to put his headphones on. It was during one of those 3 a.m. feedings, Arthur cradled against my chest as I sat in the nursery rocking chair. that I realized that man wasn't a partner. He was dead weight. I cried silently in the darkness while Arthur slept, my tears falling onto his soft hair as I whispered apologies to this innocent child who deserved so much better. Pedro slept through everything. His sleep was sacred, uninterrupted by dirty diapers or midnight feedings or the needs of his wife and child. He had soundproofed his gaming room when we first moved in together, claiming it was for better acoustics. Now I understood it was to shut out the real world entirely. The breaking point came when Arthur was 6 weeks old. I had been up all night with him. He was going through a growth spurt and wanted to nurse constantly. I was exhausted, emotional, and desperately needed a shower. Pedro emerged from his room at noon, stretching and yawning. "Good morning, sunshine," I said, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "Could you hold Arthur for 20 minutes so I can shower?" "Can't right now, babe. Tournament starts in 15 minutes. Prize money is $10,000. This could be big for us." For us. As if his gaming hobby that had never earned a penny somehow contributed to our household. I stood there in my milk-stained pajamas, holding our crying son, looking at this man who had promised to love, honor, and cherish me, who had promised to be a father to our children, who was now more concerned about virtual prizes than his real family. "Pedro, I haven't showered in 3 days. I need 20 minutes. Look, I'll watch him later, okay? This is important." "I'm important." The words burst out of me with months of suppressed frustration. "Your son is important. This family is supposed to be important." He looked at me like I was overreacting, like I was being unreasonable. "It's just a game, Maria. Relax." But it wasn't just a game. It was his priority, his passion, his escape from the responsibilities of being a husband and father. I took Arthur upstairs, called my mother to come over, and when she arrived, I finally took that shower. I stood under the hot water and made a decision that had been building for weeks. I was done. 2 months after Arthur's birth, I started making plans. Quietly, carefully, methodically. I researched divorce lawyers, looked into custody laws, and began documenting Pedro's neglect. I took photos of him gaming while Arthur cried. I saved screenshots of his gaming schedule that showed him online for 12-16 hours daily. I kept records of every missed feeding, every unchanged diaper, every time he chose his virtual world over his real family. I also started preparing for my independence. I had been a marketing coordinator before Arthur was born, and while I was on maternity leave, I used Arthur's nap times to study for the civil service exam. If I passed, I could get a stable government job with good benefits, something Pedro's sporadic freelance graphic design work had never provided. The studying was exhausting. I would put Arthur down for his afternoon nap, grab my books, and try to cram information into my sleep-deprived brain. Legal terminology, government procedures, essay writing techniques. I absorbed it all with the desperation of a woman who knew her future depended on it. Pedro never noticed. He was too busy with his latest gaming obsession to see that his wife was planning to leave him. I passed the exam with flying colors, ranking in the top 5%. The job offer came 3 weeks later, a position with the city's Family Services Department, helping families navigate the legal system. The irony wasn't lost on me. I also found a daycare near the new job, run by a wonderful woman named Mrs. Chen, who had raised 4 children of her own. She took one look at Arthur and fell in love with his chubby cheeks and bright eyes. "He's a good baby," she said, holding him expertly. "You can tell he's loved." "He is," I said, my voice thick with emotion. So loved. Everything was falling into place. I had a job, childcare, and a lawyer, Sarah Mitchell, a fierce woman in her 50s who specialized in family law and had a reputation for fighting hard for her clients. "Document everything," she advised during our first meeting. "The more evidence we have of his neglect, the stronger our case for primary custody." I did. I documented everything. The day I served Pedro with divorce papers was a Tuesday. I had taken the day off work, arranged for my mother to watch Arthur, and waited until Pedro emerged from his gaming room at 2 p.m. He was in his usual uniform, wrinkled t-shirt, boxers, and that glazed look he got after hours of staring at screens. He shuffled to the kitchen, grabbed an energy drink from the fridge, and was heading back to his cave when I stopped him. "Pedro, we need to talk." "Can it wait?" I'm in the middle of a campaign with the guys. No, it can't wait. Something in my tone must have penetrated his gaming fog because he actually looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time in weeks. I handed him the manila envelope. These are divorce papers. He stared at the envelope like it might explode. What? Maria, what are you talking about? We can work through whatever this is. Work through it? Pedro, when was the last time you held your son? I hold him all the time. When? Name one specific time in the last month. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He couldn't. When was the last time you got up with him at night? When was the last time you changed his diaper? When was the last time you fed him? You're better at that stuff. You're his mother. And you're his father. Or you're supposed to be. Pedro tore open the envelope, his hands shaking slightly as he read the papers. You can't do this, Maria. I love you. I love Arthur. Love isn't a feeling, Pedro. It's an action. It's showing up. It's being present. It's putting your family before your games. I'll change. I'll be better. I had heard this before. After our wedding, when I complained about his gaming taking over our lives, he promised to change. When I was pregnant and needed him to help prepare for the baby, he promised to change. When Arthur was born and I was overwhelmed, he promised to change. You've had 9 months to change, Pedro. 9 months to step up and be a father. You chose the games instead. Don't take Arthur away from me. I'm not taking him away. I'm asking for primary custody because you've never been present for him anyway. You'll have visitation rights. Pedro's face crumpled in a way I'd never seen before. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. You won't make it alone, he said, his voice desperate now. You need me. We need each other. I remembered Dr. Martinez's words from that night in the hospital. The moment when someone finally saw my situation clearly and spoke the truth I had been afraid to admit. No, Pedro. I don't need you. I've been alone in this marriage for years. I've been a single mother since the day Arthur was born. The only difference now is that I won't be pretending otherwise. The guys won't understand. What am I supposed to tell them? Even in this moment, he was thinking about his gaming friends. Not about losing his family. Not about the pain he'd caused. About his online reputation. Tell them whatever you want, I said. I'm done caring about your imaginary world. I picked up Arthur, who had been playing quietly in his bouncy seat, and headed for the door. Where are you going? To my real life, Pedro. You should try it sometime. When I handed him those papers, he laughed initially. A nervous, disbelieving laugh. You won't make it alone. I looked at this man who had spent more time with virtual characters than with his own son, who knew the names of his guild members better than his child's feeding schedule, who had never once gotten up for a night feeding. I'm already making it alone, I said firmly, without stuttering. And now, I won't be carrying anyone on my back. The custody battle was brutal. Pedro, suddenly realizing what he stood to lose, hired an expensive lawyer and tried to paint me as an unstable mother who was keeping him from his son. His lawyer argued that I was being vindictive, that Pedro was a loving father who just had different parenting styles. Different parenting styles. As if complete absence was a valid approach to child rearing. But I had documentation. Sarah Mitchell was brilliant, methodical, and ruthless when she needed to be. She presented a timeline of Pedro's neglect that painted a clear picture of a man who had never taken responsibility for his child. The evidence was overwhelming. Photos of Pedro gaming while Arthur cried in his bouncy seat. Screenshots of his gaming activity showing 14-16-hour daily sessions. Testimony from neighbors who had never seen him with Arthur. Medical records showing that I had taken Arthur to every single doctor's appointment alone. Pedro's lawyer tried to argue that gaming was just a hobby, like golf or reading. Sarah's response was swift and devastating. Your Honor, this isn't about a hobby. This is about a man who has been absent from his child's life from the moment of birth. A man who played video games during his son's delivery. A man who has never changed a diaper, never given a bath, never prepared a bottle. This isn't about different parenting styles. It's about the complete absence of parenting. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Patterson, had clearly seen cases like this before. She listened to Pedro's promises to change, his claims that he would be more involved now that he understood the stakes. Mr. Santos, she said, You've had 8 months to be a father to your son. 8 months to show up, to be present, to take responsibility. The court finds it troubling that it took divorce proceedings to make you realize your obligations to your child. Pedro's supervised visitation was set for every other weekend, 4 hours each session, at a family visitation center. The supervisor would ensure Arthur's safety and document Pedro's interaction with his son for future court reviews. Primary custody awarded to the mother, Judge Patterson announced. The father will have supervised visitation every other weekend, with the possibility of increased visitation if he can demonstrate consistent, engaged parenting over a period of no less than 6 months. Pedro's face crumpled. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked like he understood what he'd lost. But it was too late. The damage was done, and Arthur's well-being had to come first. As I walked out of the courthouse with Sarah, I felt lighter than I had in years. Arthur was safe, legally protected, and I was finally free to build the life we deserved. As I walked down the courthouse steps, juggling Arthur's diaper bag and my purse, I saw a familiar face waiting by the street. Dr. David Martinez, the obstetrician who had delivered Arthur, was standing there with a small bouquet of daisies and a gentle smile. Dr. Martinez? I was genuinely surprised. What are you doing here? I heard about your court case through, well, the medical community is smaller than you'd think. And please, call me David. He handed me the flowers. I wanted to congratulate you. You're incredibly brave. I felt tears welling up, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of finally feeling seen and supported. Thank you for what you said that night. Those words, they changed everything. I'm sorry I had to say it, he replied, his voice soft with compassion. But I'm glad you heard it. Too many women don't. Arthur chose that moment to wake up from his nap, blinking those big brown eyes and looking around with curiosity. David's face lit up when he saw him. And this must be Arthur. He's grown so much since that night. Would you like to hold him? The offer surprised me as much as it seemed to surprise David. I'd love to, if you don't mind. I watched this kind, gentle man hold my son with the same care and expertise he'd shown during the delivery. Arthur seemed to sense David's calm energy and settled against him contentedly. You know, David said, looking down at Arthur, I've delivered hundreds of babies, but I remember his birth vividly. Not because of the medical aspects, but because of what I witnessed in that room. Your strength, your grace under pressure, your love for this little one despite everything you were going through. I didn't feel strong. I felt broken. Sometimes being broken is the first step to becoming whole again. And look at you now. You just won a custody battle. You're raising this beautiful boy. You're building a new life. That's not broken, Maria. That's triumphant. We talked for hours that day, sitting in a small cafe while Arthur slept in his stroller. David told me about his own journey, how he'd been through a difficult divorce years earlier, how he'd thrown himself into his work, helping bring new life into the world while rebuilding his own. I see so many women go through what you went through, he said. Strong women who don't realize their own strength until they're forced to use it. You reminded me why I love what I do. Not just delivering babies, but sometimes delivering hope. Is that what you did for me? Delivered hope? I just spoke the truth. You did the rest. As we talked, I found myself drawn to David's quiet wisdom, his gentle humor, his obvious love for his work. He told me about his volunteer work at a free clinic, his passion for hiking, his close relationship with his elderly mother who lived nearby. I don't date much, he admitted as we prepared to leave. My work schedule is demanding, and I guess I haven't met anyone who seemed worth the effort. And now? He smiled, a blush creeping up his neck. Now I'm wondering if you'd be interested in having dinner sometime. When you're ready, of course. I know you're going through a lot right now. I looked at this man who had seen me at my most vulnerable, who had spoken the words that set me free, who was now holding my son like he was precious cargo. I thought about Pedro, about the years of neglect and indifference, about the fear of trusting again. But I also thought about Arthur, about the kind of man I wanted him to become, about the kind of relationship I wanted him to see as normal. I'd like that, I said. I'd like that very much. Our first official date was 3 weeks later. David insisted on picking me up at my apartment, and when I opened the door, he was holding not just flowers for me, but a small toy for Arthur. "It's a stethoscope," he said, kneeling down to Arthur's level. "Every future doctor needs one." Arthur, now 9 months old and crawling everywhere, immediately grabbed the toy and tried to chew on it. David laughed, a warm sound that filled my small apartment. "He's going to be a natural," David said. We went to a small Italian restaurant where David was apparently a regular. The owner, an elderly man named Giuseppe, greeted him warmly and made a fuss over Arthur, setting up a high chair and bringing him breadsticks to gum on. "You bring babies here often?" I teased. "Only the special ones," David replied, and I felt my heart skip a beat. Over dinner, we talked about everything and nothing. David told me about his residency, the long hours, the stress, the moment he realized he wanted to specialize in obstetrics. "There's something magical about bringing life into the world," he said, "being present for that moment when a family becomes complete. Even when the circumstances aren't ideal, there's still this incredible hope in a newborn baby." "What about when the circumstances are really not ideal? Like that night with Arthur?" David's expression grew serious. "That night broke my heart, Maria. I've seen a lot of difficult situations, but watching you go through labor alone while your husband played games, it was one of the hardest things I've witnessed professionally. You didn't seem fazed by it. I couldn't be. You needed me to be strong in that moment. But I went home that night and thought about you for hours. I hoped you'd be okay. I hoped you'd find the strength to do what needed to be done. And here we are. Here we are." Arthur chose that moment to throw a breadstick on the floor, laughing delightedly when it made a sound. David calmly picked it up and replaced it with a clean one, wiping Arthur's face with a gentleness that made my chest tight with emotion. "You're good with him," I said. "He's easy to love," David replied, then caught himself. "I mean, he's a good baby, easy to care for." But I heard what he'd said first. Easy to love. And looking at David's face as he interacted with Arthur, I could see the truth of it. After dinner, we walked through the park near my apartment. Arthur had fallen asleep in his stroller, and David and I talked quietly as we strolled past the playground where I imagined bringing Arthur when he was older. "Can I ask you something?" David said. "What made you finally decide to leave? Was it just the gaming, or was there something else?" I thought about how to explain it. It wasn't just the gaming. It was the complete absence of partnership. The feeling that I was living with a roommate who contributed nothing to our household except bills and dirty dishes. The gaming was just the most visible symptom of a deeper problem, which was, he didn't want to be a husband or a father. He wanted to be a teenager forever, with someone to take care of him and ask nothing in return. I realized I was raising 2 children, and one of them was 32 years old. David nodded. "I see that a lot in my practice. Men who aren't ready for the responsibility of fatherhood but have children anyway. It's heartbreaking for everyone involved." "Were you ready? When you got married before, I mean?" "I thought I was, but I was young, and I confused being ready for marriage with being ready to have a wife. There's a difference. Which is, being ready for marriage means being ready to be a partner, to share responsibilities, to make decisions together, to put the relationship first. Being ready to have a wife means wanting someone to take care of you and make your life easier." I stopped walking and looked at him. And now? Now I understand the difference. And I know which kind of partner I want to be. When we reached my apartment building, David walked me to the door, carrying Arthur's stroller up the stairs without being asked. "Thank you for tonight," I said. "I had a wonderful time." "So did I. Would you like to do it again?" "Yes, but..." I hesitated. "I need you to understand something. Arthur comes first. He has to. He's been through enough upheaval, and I won't introduce instability into his life. I wouldn't ask you to. And Maria? Any man who can't understand that Arthur comes first isn't worth your time." He kissed my cheek gently, smiled at sleeping Arthur, and headed back down the stairs. I watched him go, feeling something I hadn't felt in years: hope. While David and I were building something beautiful, Pedro was falling apart. The supervised visitations were a disaster from the start. He would show up late, distracted, clearly uncomfortable with the structured environment of the family center. The reports from the supervisor, Mrs. Thompson, painted a picture of a man who had no idea how to interact with his own child. He would try to engage Arthur with his phone, showing him videos instead of playing with him. He'd get frustrated when Arthur cried, looking helplessly at Mrs. Thompson as if she could make it stop. "He brings his phone to every visit," Mrs. Thompson reported to the court. "He seems more interested in checking his messages than engaging with Arthur. The child becomes fussy when he senses his father's distraction." Pedro's lawyer tried to argue that he was adjusting, that he needed more time to learn how to be a father, but Judge Patterson was not impressed. "Mr. Santos has had nearly a year to learn how to be a father," she said during a review hearing. "The court is concerned about his lack of progress and his continued inability to prioritize his child's needs." Pedro's gaming addiction had spiraled out of control after the divorce. Without the structure of family life, minimal as his participation had been, he was online 20 hours a day, barely eating, barely sleeping. His apartment was a mess, his hygiene was poor, and his mental health was clearly suffering. He missed 3 consecutive visitation appointments, each time claiming he'd forgotten or that something urgent had come up online. The court was not amused. "Mr. Santos," Judge Patterson said sternly, "these visits are not optional. They are court-ordered. Your repeated failure to appear suggests that you are not taking your parental responsibilities seriously." Pedro's mother, Carmen, called me one evening crying, "Maria, I'm so sorry for what my son put you through. I see now what you were dealing with. He won't listen to me, won't get help. He's lost so much weight, and all he does is play those stupid games. I'm sorry, Carmen. I know this is hard for you too. You were the best thing that ever happened to him, and he threw it away. And Arthur, my beautiful grandson. Pedro doesn't even seem to realize what he's lost." "Arthur is doing well," I assured her. "He's happy, healthy, and loved." "I know. You're a wonderful mother. I'm afraid for Pedro. I'm afraid he's going to lose his son completely." Her fears were justified. Pedro's visits became more sporadic, and when he did show up, he was often unprepared, having brought no activities, no snacks, no evidence that he'd thought about how to spend time with his son. Arthur, now walking and babbling, would cry when Pedro tried to hold him. He didn't recognize this man who appeared occasionally, smelling of energy drinks and desperation. The final blow came when Pedro was arrested for failing to pay child support. He had been ordered to pay $800 monthly, but his gaming addiction had cost him several freelance jobs. He was spending what little money he had on gaming equipment, energy drinks, and online tournaments. "He's living like a college student," Carmen told me during one of our monthly phone calls. "Eating ramen noodles, sleeping on an air mattress, but he just bought a $2,000 gaming chair. I don't understand how his mind works." I didn't understand either, but I was beginning to realize that Pedro had never really grown up. Marriage, fatherhood, divorce, these were just obstacles to his true passion, which was escaping reality through gaming. The arrest was a wake-up call for Pedro, but not in the way anyone hoped. Instead of motivating him to get his life together, it sent him into a deeper spiral. He moved back in with his mother, sold most of his possessions except his gaming equipment, and essentially became a hermit. Carmen was beside herself. "He won't look for work. He won't go to therapy. He just sits in his room playing those games. I feel like I'm enabling him, but he's my son. I don't know what to do." "You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved," I told her gently. "Pedro has to want to change." "What about Arthur? Doesn't he want to be a father to Arthur?" The truth was painful but clear. Pedro had never wanted to be a father. He had wanted the idea of being a father, the social acceptance that came with having a family, but he had never wanted the actual responsibility. The court eventually terminated Pedro's visitation rights after he missed 6 consecutive appointments and failed to pay child support for 4 months. Judge Patterson's final ruling was harsh, but fair. Mr. Santos has demonstrated a pattern of neglect and irresponsibility that is not in the best interests of the child. The court finds that he has abandoned his parental responsibilities and shows no indication of changing his behavior. Pedro didn't even show up for that hearing. He was apparently competing in some online tournament that weekend. While Pedro was destroying his life, David and I were building something beautiful. Our relationship developed slowly, carefully, with Arthur's well-being always at the center of our decisions. David never tried to rush things or push himself into a father role. Instead, he let Arthur set the pace, always respecting the boundaries of a child who had already experienced abandonment. "I don't want to be his replacement father," David told me one evening as we watched Arthur play with blocks on the living room floor. "I want to be his David, someone who loves him and shows up for him consistently." "That's exactly what he needs," I said, leaning against David's shoulder. "Consistency, reliability, someone who keeps their promises." David kept every promise he made to Arthur. If he said he'd be at a playground at 3 p.m., he was there at 2:55. If he promised to read a bedtime story, he never begged off because he was tired. If he said they'd go to the zoo on Saturday, they went to the zoo on Saturday. Arthur began to trust him in small ways. He'd reach for David when he was tired. He'd bring him toys to play with. He'd ask David to push him on the swings at the park. "Mama, why does David always come when he says he will?" Arthur asked one day when he was almost 2. "Because David cares about you, and people who care about you keep their promises." My other daddy didn't keep promises. It broke my heart that Arthur was already forming this understanding, but I was also proud of his intelligence and emotional awareness. "No, baby, he didn't. But David does. And I do. And Grandma Carmen does. There are people in your life who will always keep their promises to you." David and I had been dating for 8 months when Arthur took his first steps. We were at David's apartment, and Arthur was cruising along the coffee table when he suddenly let go and took 3 wobbly steps toward David. "Maria, did you see that?" David's joy was pure and uninhibited. He scooped Arthur up and spun him around. "You did it, buddy! You walked!" Arthur giggled and clapped his hands, delighted with himself and with David's reaction. In that moment, I knew David loved my son as much as I did. That night, after Arthur was asleep, David and I sat on his couch talking about the milestone. "I should call Pedro," I said. "He should know about Arthur's first steps." "Should you? Or do you feel like you should?" I thought about it. Pedro hadn't called in 3 months. He'd missed Arthur's first birthday. He'd never asked about developmental milestones or doctor's appointments. "I feel like I should," I admitted, "but I don't think he'd actually care." "Then don't call him. Arthur took his first steps today toward someone who loves him and will be there for all his other firsts. That's what matters." David was right. Pedro had forfeited his right to these moments when he chose his games over his son. David proposed on a sunny Saturday afternoon in the botanical gardens where we'd had our first official date. Arthur, now 2.5, was chasing butterflies while David and I sat on a bench watching him. "He's getting so big," David said, smiling as Arthur tried to catch a yellow butterfly that kept dancing just out of reach. "He is. Sometimes I can't believe how fast time is going." "Maria, can I ask you something?" I turned to look at him, noting the nervous excitement in his voice. "Of course. How do you feel about making this official? All of it? What do you mean?" David slid off the bench and onto one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Arthur, attracted by the movement, toddled over to see what was happening. "Maria Santos, you are the strongest, most amazing woman I've ever met. You've shown me what love looks like in action, what it means to put family first, what it means to be truly brave. I love you, and I love Arthur, and I want to be your husband and his father in every way that matters." Tears were streaming down my face as David opened the box to reveal a beautiful but simple solitaire diamond ring. "Will you marry me? Will you let me be Arthur's dad? Will you let me love you both for the rest of my life?" Arthur clapped his hands and said, "Yes," before I could answer, making us both laugh through our tears. "Yes," I said, my voice shaky with emotion. "Yes to all of it." David slipped the ring onto my finger and stood up to kiss me. Arthur wrapped his arms around both our legs, and we stood there in the garden, becoming a family in the most perfect way possible. "Daddy David," Arthur said, testing out the words. "Daddy David." "That's right, buddy, if that's what you want to call me." "Daddy David! Daddy David!" Arthur ran in circles around us, delighted with his new vocabulary. That night, after Arthur was asleep, David and I talked about the future. "I want to adopt him," David said. "Legally, officially. I want to be his father on paper, not just in our hearts. Pedro would have to consent, or we'd have to prove abandonment. He hasn't seen Arthur in 6 months, hasn't paid child support in 8 months, and hasn't called in 3 months. I think we can prove abandonment." I thought about Pedro, probably sitting in his mother's basement at that very moment, absorbed in some virtual world while his real son slept peacefully in a home filled with love. "I think you're right," I said. "And I think Arthur deserves to have a father who chose him, not just one who happened to contribute DNA. "I choose him," David said firmly. "I choose both of you, every day." We planned a small wedding for the following spring. Nothing elaborate, just our closest family and friends in David's mother's backyard garden. Arthur, now 3, was excited about being the ring bearer and had been practicing walking slowly and carrying a pillow for weeks. Carmen, Pedro's mother, was invited and attended, though she came alone. Pedro had been asked but said he couldn't make it because of important commitments. Carmen didn't elaborate, but I suspected those commitments involved a computer screen. "You look beautiful, mija," Carmen said, hugging me before the ceremony. "David is a good man. Arthur is lucky to have him." "Thank you, Carmen. That means a lot. I'm sorry about Pedro. I raised him better than this. I don't know where I went wrong." "You didn't go wrong. Pedro made his own choices. You're still Arthur's grandmother, and you'll always be welcome in our lives." Carmen cried a little, and I understood. She was grieving the son she'd raised and the grandson she was losing access to because of that son's choices. The ceremony was perfect. Arthur walked down the aisle very seriously, carrying our rings on a small pillow. He only got distracted once, when he spotted a butterfly and veered off course, but David's brother gently guided him back to the altar. David's vows made me cry. He promised to love me through all of life's challenges, to be the partner I deserved, and to be the father Arthur needed. He promised to always put our family first, to show up when we needed him, and to never take for granted the gift of being loved by us. My vows were simpler, but no less heartfelt. I promised to trust him with my heart and my son's heart, to build a life together based on mutual respect and genuine partnership, and to never again settle for less than we deserved. When the officiant asked if anyone had objections, Arthur raised his hand and said, "I do." Everyone laughed, thinking he was confused, but then he continued, "I do want Daddy David to be my daddy forever." There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. After the ceremony, as we were taking pictures, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I glanced at it and immediately regretted it. "Heard you got married. Hope you're happy with your rebound guy." It was Pedro, of course. Even on my wedding day, he couldn't resist inserting his negativity into my happiness. David noticed my expression change. "Everything okay?" I showed him the text. He read it, shook his head, and handed me back my phone. "Block the number," he said simply. "This is our day, our family, our happiness. He doesn't get to be part of it anymore." I blocked the number and deleted the message. David was right. Pedro had made his choices, and we had made ours. 6 months after our wedding, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I applied to law school. "Are you sure?" David asked when I told him about my acceptance letter. "It's going to be incredibly demanding, especially with Arthur still so young." "I'm sure. I want to help other women who are going through what I went through. I want to be the lawyer I wish I'd had." "You had Sarah Mitchell. She was excellent." "She was. But she didn't understand what it felt like to be in my situation. She fought for me professionally, but she couldn't relate to me personally. I want to be both, an excellent lawyer and someone who truly understands." David was incredibly supportive. He rearranged his schedule to take on more childcare responsibilities, helped me study for the LSAT, and never once complained about the financial strain of law school tuition. Arthur, now 4, became my study buddy. He'd sit quietly coloring while I read case law, and he learned to whisper in the library when I had to study there. "Mom is learning to help people," I explained to him when he asked why I had so many books. "Like how Daddy David helps people have babies." "Exactly like that." Different kinds of helping, but helping. Law school was brutal. I was older than most of my classmates, had more responsibilities, and often felt like I was drowning in reading assignments and case briefs. But I had something many of my classmates lacked: a clear sense of purpose. I knew exactly why I was there and what I wanted to do with my degree. That clarity carried me through the most difficult moments. My family law professor, Professor Williams, became a mentor. She was a tough woman in her 60s who had fought many of the same battles I was preparing for. "You have something special, Maria," she told me after I'd given a particularly passionate presentation about custody law. "You understand these issues from the inside. That's going to make you a formidable advocate." "I hope so. I want to make a difference." "You will? But remember, you can't save everyone. Some people don't want to be saved." I thought about Pedro, about the choices he'd made, about the way he'd destroyed his own life and forfeited his relationship with Arthur. Professor Williams was right. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, but you can save the ones who do. As Arthur grew older, his questions about Pedro became more complex. He had vague memories of a man who used to live in our house, but David was the only father he really remembered. "Why did my first daddy leave?" he asked one evening when he was 5, as I was tucking him into bed. "Sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people they love," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Your first daddy loved you, but he wasn't ready to be a daddy. He had some problems that made it hard for him to take care of you." "What kind of problems?" "He had trouble focusing on what was important. He spent too much time playing games and not enough time with his family." Arthur considered this seriously. "Like if I played video games all day instead of going to school." "Something like that. But that would be silly. School is important." "Yes, it is. And family is important too." "Is that why Daddy David doesn't play video games?" I smiled. David did play video games occasionally, but always after Arthur was asleep, and never for more than an hour. Daddy David likes to play games sometimes, but he knows that being with his family is more important. "Good. I like it when Daddy David reads me stories." "Me too, baby. Me too." I thought about calling Pedro to let him know about these conversations, to give him a chance to be part of Arthur's life. But every time I considered it, I remembered the years of broken promises, the missed visits, the unpaid child support. Arthur was thriving with David as his father. He was confident, secure, and had never experienced the disappointment that comes from having a parent who doesn't show up. Why would I risk that for a man who had shown no interest in being a father? The adoption process was surprisingly straightforward. Pedro had abandoned his parental rights so completely that proving it was easy. He hadn't contacted Arthur in over 2 years, hadn't paid child support in just as long, and had made no effort to exercise his visitation rights. The court appointed an attorney to represent Pedro's interests, as required by law, but even that attorney recommended that the adoption be approved. "Mr. Santos has shown no interest in maintaining a relationship with his son," the attorney reported to the judge. "He has been made aware of these proceedings and has chosen not to participate. Pedro didn't contest the adoption. He didn't even show up to the hearing." Judge Patterson, the same judge who had handled our original custody case, was pleased to see us again under happier circumstances. "It's wonderful to see how well Arthur is doing," she said, smiling at my son who was sitting quietly beside me in his best shirt and tie. "David, you understand that adoption creates the same legal rights and responsibilities as biological parenthood?" "Yes, Your Honor, I understand, and I accept those responsibilities gladly." "And Arthur, do you understand that David is going to be your legal daddy?" Arthur nodded solemnly. "He's already my daddy. This just makes it official." The judge laughed. "Yes, I suppose it does. Well then, I hereby grant this petition for adoption. David Martinez, you are now Arthur's legal father." David cried. I cried. Arthur asked if we could go get ice cream to celebrate. As we walked out of the courthouse, Arthur took both our hands and swung between us. "Now we're all the same family," he said contentedly. "We always were," David replied. "Now we have papers to prove it." I graduated from law school 3rd in my class and was immediately hired by Morrison, Chen & Associates, one of the city's most respected family law firms. They specialized in complex custody cases, high-conflict divorces, and domestic violence situations. My first case was representing a woman named Jennifer, whose husband had been emotionally abusive throughout their marriage. He had isolated her from friends and family, controlled their finances, and used their children as pawns in his psychological manipulation. He's a lawyer too, Jennifer told me during our first meeting. He knows the system. He's threatened to take the kids away if I leave him. Knowledge of the system can be an advantage, I said, but it can also be a weakness. Sometimes lawyers make the mistake of thinking they can represent themselves, or that they're above the law. He's been documenting everything I do wrong. He has files on me. Then we'll document everything he does wrong. And Jennifer? Being a good mother doesn't mean being a perfect mother. It means loving your children and putting their needs first. The case was difficult. Jennifer's husband was manipulative and vindictive, and he had money to hire expensive lawyers. But I had something he didn't: genuine passion for protecting my client and her children. During the custody evaluation, it became clear that Jennifer's husband was more interested in punishing her than in actually parenting his children. He couldn't answer basic questions about their schedules, their friends, or their medical history. "When was the last time you attended a parent-teacher conference?" I asked him during his deposition. "I don't remember exactly. My wife handles most of that." "When was the last time you helped with homework?" "I work long hours. That's my wife's responsibility." "When was the last time you put your children to bed?" Look, I provide for my family. That's what fathers do." "Mr. Collins, do you know what your son's favorite book is?" "He's 7. He probably likes superhero books." "Do you know what your daughter's favorite food is?" "All kids like pizza." "Do you know what time your children go to bed?" 8 o'clock? 8:30? "It's 7 o'clock for your daughter and 7:30 for your son. These are schedules you established in your own home." By the end of the deposition, it was clear that Jennifer's husband was a provider, not a parent. He had never been actively involved in his children's daily lives and was seeking custody purely as a way to control Jennifer. We won primary custody for Jennifer, with her husband getting supervised visitation until he could demonstrate genuine interest in his children's well-being. "Thank you," Jennifer said, hugging me after the hearing. "You saved my children." "You saved your children," I corrected. "I just helped with the paperwork." Arthur was 8 when Pedro suddenly reappeared in our lives. I was in my office reviewing a case when my secretary buzzed me. "Maria, there's a man here to see you. He says he's Arthur's biological father." My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard from Pedro in over 3 years, not since the adoption was finalized. "Send him in." Pedro looked terrible. He had lost weight, his clothes were wrinkled, and he had the pale, unhealthy complexion of someone who spent too much time indoors. He was 35 years old but looked 50. "Hello, Maria." "Pedro, what are you doing here?" "I want to see Arthur." "You gave up your rights to see Arthur. David adopted him 3 years ago." "I know. I made mistakes. I want to fix them." I studied this man who had once been my husband, the father of my child. He seemed genuinely remorseful, but I had heard his apologies before. "What changed?" "My mom died." I felt a pang of sadness. Carmen had been a good woman caught in an impossible situation with her son. "I'm sorry for your loss. She was a good person." She was. And before she died, she told me some things I needed to hear. About what I lost. About what I threw away. "Pedro, you've been gone for 3 years. Arthur doesn't even remember you." "I know. But I'm clean now. I'm in therapy. I have a job. I'm trying to be better." "A job doing what?" "I work at a computer repair shop. It's not much, but it's steady work and I'm good at it." I wanted to believe him, but I also had to protect Arthur. "What do you want?" "I want to meet him. Just once. I want to apologize for not being there. He's 8 years old, Pedro. He has a father who loves him and has been there for him every day since he was 9 months old. David is his dad in every way that matters." "I know. I'm not trying to replace anyone. I want him to know that I'm sorry." I thought about Arthur, about the questions he occasionally asked about his first daddy. Maybe meeting Pedro would give him closure, or maybe it would just confuse him. I need to talk to David about this, and Arthur. If either of them says no, that's the end of it. Fair enough. And Pedro? If you do this, you have to be prepared for the possibility that Arthur won't want a relationship with you. He's not going to suddenly want to be your son just because you show up. I understand, but I wasn't sure he did. Pedro had always lived in fantasy worlds, and I suspected he had some unrealistic expectations about what this reunion might accomplish. David was not thrilled about Pedro's request, but he agreed to support whatever Arthur wanted to do. "He's old enough to make this decision for himself," David said, "and maybe it would be good for him to have some closure." We sat Arthur down and explained the situation as simply as possible. "Your first daddy wants to meet you," I said. "He wants to apologize for not being there when you were little." Arthur was quiet for a long moment. Why wasn't he there? He was dealing with some problems that made it hard for him to be a good daddy. He made some bad choices. Is he better now? He says he is. But you don't have to meet him if you don't want to. Arthur looked at David. "What do you think I should do, Dad?" David's face showed how much that question meant to him. "I think you should do whatever feels right to you. If you want to meet him, I'll be there with you. If you don't, that's okay too. Will you and Mama be there?" "If you want us to be." Arthur nodded. "Okay, I'll meet him, but I want you both there." We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a family restaurant with a play area. Pedro arrived early and was sitting nervously at a corner table when we walked in. Arthur stayed close to David, holding his hand as we approached the table. Pedro's eyes filled with tears when he saw his son. "Hi, Arthur," he said softly. "You've gotten so big." Arthur looked at him solemnly. "Are you my first daddy?" "Yes, I am. And I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For not being there when you were little. For not being a good daddy to you." Arthur considered this. "It's okay. I have a daddy now." Pedro's face crumpled slightly, but he nodded. "I know. And I'm glad. David seems like a really good dad." "He is. He reads to me and helps with my homework and comes to all my soccer games." "That's wonderful. I'm sorry I missed all of that." "Why did you miss it?" Pedro looked at me, then at David, then back at Arthur. "I was sick in a way that made it hard for me to think about anything except playing games. I chose games instead of spending time with you, and that was wrong. Are you better now?" "I'm trying to be. I'm learning how to make better choices." They talked for about an hour. Pedro asked about Arthur's interests, his school, his friends. Arthur answered politely, but remained close to David throughout the conversation. As we were preparing to leave, Pedro said, "Arthur, I don't expect you to call me Dad or anything like that. You already have a dad. But I hope maybe we could be friends?" Arthur thought about this seriously. "Maybe. But I'm pretty busy with school and soccer and my friends." "I understand. And thank you for meeting me. It means a lot." As we walked to the car, Arthur was quiet. Finally, he said, "He seemed sad." "He is sad," I replied. "He's sad about the choices he made. I felt sorry for him, but I don't really want to see him again." "That's okay. You don't have to." "Good. Can we go home now? I want to show Dad my new Lego set." David smiled and ruffled Arthur's hair. "Let's go home, buddy." 5 years later, I was preparing for one of the biggest cases of my career, a high-profile custody battle involving a tech executive who had been so absorbed in his work that he had essentially abandoned his family while living in the same house. The similarities to my own story were striking, except that this time, I was the lawyer fighting for the abandoned wife and children. He claims he was providing for his family, my client Sarah told me, but he was never present. He'd come home from work and go straight to his home office. He'd eat dinner while answering emails. He never attended a single school event or doctor's appointment. Did you document any of this? I started taking pictures and videos after I realized what was happening. I have hours of footage of him ignoring our children while he worked. I reviewed the evidence Sarah had collected. Photos of her husband on his laptop during family dinners. Videos of him taking calls during their daughter's birthday party. Documentation of every missed school event, every broken promise, every time he chose work over family. It was Pedro all over again, except instead of games, it was work. The opposing counsel painted Sarah as a bitter wife who was trying to punish her husband for being successful. They argued that he was a good provider who deserved joint custody of his children. During his deposition, Sarah's husband showed the same disconnect from his children's lives that Pedro had shown with Arthur. "Do you know your son's teacher's name?" "I think it's Mrs. Johnson, or maybe Mrs. Jackson." "It's Mrs. Williams." "Do you know what grade your daughter is in?" "Third grade." "She's in fourth grade." "Do you know what your son's favorite subject is?" "Math, probably. He's good with numbers." "According to his report card, his favorite subject is art, and he's struggling with math. When was the last time you helped him with homework?" Look, I work 60 hours a week. I'm providing for my family." "Mr. Thompson, when was the last time you read your daughter a bedtime story?" "I don't remember specifically, but I'm sure I have." "According to your daughter's testimony, you've never read her a bedtime story." By the end of the deposition, it was clear that Sarah's husband was a stranger to his own children. He knew their names and ages, but nothing about their personalities, interests, or daily lives. We won primary custody for Sarah, with supervised visitation for her husband, until he could demonstrate genuine commitment to his children's well-being. After the hearing, Sarah hugged me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for understanding. So many people told me I was overreacting, that I should be grateful he was such a good provider." "Being a good provider doesn't make you a good parent," I said. "Your children need more than financial support. They need presence, attention, and love." "How did you know exactly what to ask him?" "It was like you could see right through his act." I thought about Pedro, about the years of living with someone who was physically present but emotionally absent, about the loneliness of being married to someone who was more committed to his hobbies than his family. "I've been where you are," I said simply. "I know what it looks like when someone chooses their priorities and family isn't one of them." Arthur graduated from high school as valedictorian, with a full scholarship to study engineering at the state university. David and I sat in the audience, bursting with pride as our son gave his graduation speech. "I want to thank my parents," Arthur said, looking directly at us. "My mom, who taught me that strength comes from standing up for what's right, and my dad, who taught me that love is about showing up every day." There wasn't a dry eye in the house. After the ceremony, we took pictures and celebrated with family friends. Arthur was surrounded by people who loved him: David's family, my family, friends from school and soccer and church. As we were packing up to leave, I noticed a familiar figure standing alone near the parking lot. Pedro, now in his 40s, was watching the celebration from a distance. He looked older, grayer, but somehow more solid than he had during our last meeting. "I'll be right back," I told David and walked over to Pedro. "Hello, Maria." "Pedro, I didn't expect to see you here. I hope it's okay. I heard about the graduation through my mom's old friends. I just wanted to see him graduate. How long have you been here?" "I got here early. I heard his speech. He seems like an incredible young man." "He is. David and I are very proud of him." "You should be. You did a great job raising him." "David did a great job raising him. I just helped." Pedro nodded. "I know, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful that Arthur had a real father when I couldn't be one." "Are you okay, Pedro? You look different." "I'm better. Really better this time. I've been clean for 4 years now. I have a good job, a small apartment, a normal life. I'm not here to cause problems or to try to insert myself into his life. I just wanted to see him graduate." "I'm glad you're doing better. I know it's too late for me to be his father. David is his father. But I want you to know that I'm proud of him, and I'm proud of you for building the life you all deserve." "Thank you. That means something. I'm going to go now. I don't want to complicate his day. But Maria, thank you for not giving up on him when I did." Pedro walked away, and I watched him go. For the first time since our divorce, I felt something like peace about our situation. He had finally grown up, but it was too late for him to be Arthur's father. That role belonged to David now, and Arthur was better for it. 10 years later, I was a senior partner at my firm, specializing in complex family law cases. I had helped hundreds of women and children escape difficult situations, and I had trained dozens of young lawyers to do the same. Arthur was now a successful engineer, married to a wonderful woman named Jessica, and they had just had their first child, a daughter they named Carmen after Pedro's mother. David had been promoted to chief of obstetrics at the hospital where he had delivered Arthur all those years ago. He was still delivering babies, still helping families begin their journeys. We were sitting in the hospital waiting room, having just met our granddaughter, when a young woman approached us. "Excuse me, are you Maria Martinez?" "Yes, I am. I'm Jennifer Collins. You represented my mother in her custody case about 15 years ago." I remembered the case. Another absent father, another mother fighting for her children's well-being. "How is your mother doing?" "She's wonderful. She remarried a few years ago to a man who actually wanted to be a stepfather. I graduated from law school last year, and I'm starting work at a family law firm next month." "Oh, that's wonderful. What made you choose family law?" "I watched what you did for my mother, how you fought for us, how you understood what we were going through because you'd been there yourself. I want to do the same thing for other families." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. That's the best compliment I've ever received. "I have one more thing to tell you. My biological father, the one who was more interested in punishing my mother than in being a father to us, he died last year. Alone. Still angry. Still bitter. Still blaming everyone else for his problems. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be. He chose his path, just like you chose yours. And your path led to all of this." She gestured around the hospital, at David holding our granddaughter, at Arthur and Jessica glowing with new parent joy. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to a family is for the wrong person to leave it. After Jennifer left, I sat quietly holding Carmen while David and Arthur talked about engineering, and Jessica rested. I thought about the woman I had been 20 years ago, laboring in this very hospital while her husband played video games. That woman had been so afraid, so convinced that she needed someone who clearly didn't need her. "What are you thinking about?" David asked softly. "That night when Arthur was born. What you said to me. You don't need him." Those 5 words changed everything. They set me free. You set yourself free. I just spoke the truth you already knew. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Pedro had been different? If he had stepped up and been the father Arthur needed? David considered this. "I think about it sometimes, but I don't regret how things turned out. Arthur is an incredible young man. You're an amazing lawyer helping families every day, and we're here together watching our son become a father himself. No regrets? Only one. I regret that it took so long for us to find each other." I looked at this man who had seen me at my most vulnerable moment and had chosen to love me anyway, who had chosen to love my son as his own, who had shown up every day for 20 years without fail. "I love you," I said simply. "I love you too. Both of you. All of you." He gestured to Arthur, Jessica, and baby Carmen. "This whole beautiful family we built together." Arthur overheard and smiled. "I love you too, Dad. And Mom. Thank you for giving me the life I had instead of the one I might have had." Today, as I write this story, Arthur is 35 years old, the same age Pedro was when he lost his family to his addiction. Arthur has 3 children now, and he's the kind of father I always dreamed he would have. Present, engaged, loving, and completely devoted to his family. He coaches his son's soccer team, helps his daughters with their homework, and never misses a school event or doctor's appointment. When he comes home from work, he puts his phone away and focuses on his family. He's everything Pedro never was, and everything David taught him to be. Pedro is still alive as far as I know. He's in his 50s now, living alone in a small apartment, working at the same computer repair shop he's been at for 15 years. He never remarried, never had other children, never rebuilt his life in any meaningful way. He sends Arthur a birthday card every year, and Arthur sends him a polite thank you note in return. There's no animosity, no anger, just a polite acknowledgement of their biological connection, and nothing more. Arthur calls David Dad and introduces him as his father. When people ask about his biological father, Arthur simply says, "David is my father. He's the one who raised me." Last week, Arthur brought his children to visit us, and I watched David, now in his 70s but still energetic and loving, play with his grandchildren in the same gentle, patient way he had played with Arthur all those years ago. "Grandpa David, tell us the story about when you met Grandma," 5-year-old Sophia asked. David smiled and looked at me. "Well, I met your grandma on a very special night. She was being very brave, and I was helping her bring a baby into the world." "Was the baby Daddy?" It was. And your grandma was the strongest, most amazing woman I had ever met. She still is. And then you fell in love? It took some time, but yes. We fell in love, and I became your daddy's daddy, and we all became a family. What happened to the other daddy? Arthur answered this one. The other daddy wasn't ready to be a daddy. He had some problems that made it hard for him to take care of a family. But that's okay, because Grandpa David was ready, and he was the best daddy I could have asked for. Did it make you sad? No, sweetheart. It made me grateful, because I got exactly the daddy I needed. I watched this conversation from the kitchen, where I was preparing dinner for our family. David had never once made Arthur feel like he was second choice or a consolation prize. He had loved him fiercely from the beginning, and that love had created the secure, confident man Arthur had become. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Collins. Now Jennifer Collins Wright, a successful family law attorney who had taken over many of my cases when I semi-retired last year. Just won the Morrison case. Full custody to mom, supervised visitation to dad. Another family saved. Thank you for teaching me how to fight for what matters. I smiled and texted back, You did that. I just showed you the tools. As I set the table for dinner, I thought about all the families I had helped over the years. All the women who had found the strength to leave impossible situations. All the children who had been protected from parents who weren't ready or able to put them first. And I thought about that night 20 years ago, when a doctor looked at a woman in labor and said 5 words that changed everything. You don't need him. Those words had been a gift, not just to me, but to Arthur and to all the families I had helped since then. They had been the beginning of a journey that led to this moment, a house full of love, laughter, and the kind of family I had always dreamed of having. David was right that night in the hospital. I didn't need Pedro. I never had. I just needed to believe in myself. And now, watching my son be the father he learned to be from David, watching my grandchildren grow up in a home filled with love and security, I know that sometimes the best thing that can happen to a family is for the wrong person to leave it. Because when they do, it makes room for the right person to come in. And the right person, the one who chooses you every day, who shows up when you need them, who loves your children as their own, that person is worth waiting for. David chose us. Every single day for 20 years he chose us, and we chose him back. That's what real love looks like. Not the fantasy version that exists in games and movies, but the real version that shows up with dirty diapers and homework help and bedtime stories and soccer games and graduations and grandchildren. The version that stays. The version that chooses you. The version that says, I'm here, and means it. That's the love Arthur learned from David. That's the love he's giving to his own children. That's the love that breaks cycles and builds families and creates legacies. And it all started with 5 words from a doctor who saw a woman in pain and spoke the truth she needed to hear. You don't need him. Because she didn't. She just needed to believe she deserved better. And she did. We all do. So, what did you think of my story? Did it touch your heart? Maybe you're going through something similar right now. Or maybe you've had your own amazing turnaround in life. If this story resonated with you, please like this post, subscribe for more real-life stories, and comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts or your own experiences. Your support means the world to me. Thanks for reading.